Welcome back to the Sabbath at Midnight. And this is going to be a show going back into antiquity so we can get a better understanding as believers in Christ. Who are the seven sages? And what this Sumerian kings list is all about. We're going to start off with their cuneiform in bits and pieces. And there was that episode I mentioned in the intro with Gary Wayne. Go back and listen to that one. That was the first world age from Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, when that world perished in water. And a lot of these entities seems like they did escape, or God let them escape. And you'll see why these were water type of creatures. So before the flood, after the kingship descended from heaven, this kingship was in Eridu. And the two kings of Eridu are mentioned before the city fell, and the kingship was taken to Bad Tibria. This pattern of cities receiving the kingship and then falling or being defeated only to be succeeded by the next. In the present throughout the entire text, often in the exact same words, this first section lists 8 kings who ruled over 5 cities apart from Eridu and Bad Tibiru. These also included Larag, Zimber, and Shurupak. The duration of each reign is also given, which is interesting. In the first section, the reigns vary between 43,200 and 28,000 years for a total of 241,200 years. The section ends with the line, "Then the flood swept over." Among the kings mentioned in this section in ancient Mesopotamia, the god Dimazid, later known as Tammuz, and the antediluvian 7 sages in the biblical narrative would be Shemiyaza, Amasis, Gadriel, Bagriel, Coriel, Adriel, plus Satan. And this is noted in Egyptian archaeologist David Roll's book, Legends. So it's obvious that Satan had a he had a hand in all this from after the First World Age. So this is after the flood. Now, after the flood swept over and the kingship descended from heaven again, the kingship was in Kish now, not Eridu. And after this well-known line, this section goes on to list 23 kings of Kish, who ruled between 1,500 and 300 years for a total of 24,510 years. The exact numbers of these years, they vary between the copies. Apart from the lengths of their reigns and whether they were the son of their predecessors, no other details are usually given on the exploits of these kings. The exceptions are Etana, who ascended to heaven and consolidated all the foreign countries, and Ima Bargarishi, who made the land of Elam submit. So this entity is also known as the first king of the Sumerian kings list, whose name is attested in the early dynastic one inscriptions. So let me get a slurp here. His successor was Aga of Kish, the final king mentioned before Kish, fell, and the kingship was taken to Ana. This also appears in the poem of Gilgamesh and Aga. So out of the many artifacts that have been recovered from the sites of Iraq, these were flourishing Sumerian cities that they once stood. And many of you heard that before. And The few more have been intriguing than the Sumerian Kings List, an ancient manuscript originally recorded in the Sumerian language. This is the Kings List is a register of the kings of Sumer. This is today ancient Iraq, from the Sumerian and neighboring dynasties. The list includes their names, the supposed the reign of lengths, and the locations of the official kingship. What makes this unique is the fact that it blends apparently with mystical, pre-dynastic, and with historical rulers who are known to have existed in real life. So that's a big question here. Did these entities reign? Were they real? I think they did, because we'll get into it later, but all of a sudden humanity just rose with knowledge. And this started with supposedly with the Sumerians. But I want to talk about that just really quick. The Sumerian writings are noted by many in this belief that these were the first, the oldest text, older than the Bible. Well, that may be true. However, just because it's written doesn't mean make it older. And you go back to Adam was believed to be 6,000 years ago. In Islam, it's 20,000 years. You go to the day 6 people, that goes way back before Adam. Who knows? We don't know. 1,000, a million years, we don't know. Then you get Genesis 1, 1, 1, 2. We have no timeline when that happened, when the reign of the angels was on this first world, when the sons of God shouted for joy. We don't know. 100,000 years, 10,000 years, million years, we don't know. But we do know what Moses wrote down in Genesis is older. That knowledge is older than the Sumerian text. It may have been written after the Sumerians, but once again, just because something's written doesn't make it older. So like a lot of tribes, they keep their own traditions and their own sacred stories, and they don't write them down. Sometimes they do later. For example, like the Paiute Indians, when they fought the red-haired giants. It was never written down. It was always passed on story by story to the next generation. It was finally written down in a book. That's just an example. So the first fragment of this rare and unique text, it's the 4,000-year-old cuneiform tablet. It was found in the 1900s by a German American scholar, Hermann Hipprecht, at the site of the ancient Nippur, and his results were published in 1906. Since his discovery, at least 18 other exemplars of the King's List have been found, most of them dating back half of the Isin dynasty, 2017 to 1794 BC. And what's interesting is no two documents are identical. However, they say there's enough material in all versions of the Sumerian King's List to make it clear that they are derived from a single ideal account of the Sumerian history. Well, I don't know about that, but it could be possible. And what this cuneiform is, it's like a block, a four-sided like a rectangle, and it's known as the Weld Blundell prism. And it's held in a museum in Oxford. It represents the most extensive version, as well as the most complete copy of the Sumerian King's List. And it's about 8 inches high, and it's four-sided, 2 columns on each side. And it is believed that this gentleman, Weld Blundell, this prism, originally had a wooden spindle. So it had a wooden spindle, they believe, so it was like, twirled around and looked at. It lists rulers of the antediluvian, before the flood, This is Noah's flood. This is not the first world age flood. This is Noah's flood. So these are dynasties from the 14th ruler of the dynasty Isin. It is 1763 to 1753 BC. The list is of immense value because it reflects very old traditions, at the same time providing an important chronological framework relating to the different periods of the kingship in Sumeria. It even demonstrates remarkable parallels to the accounts in Genesis. Now, I'm of the persuasion that, see, these entities, these seven sages, they were also angelic before the flood. So they had knowledge of heaven, just like Satan does. They had knowledge of the Bible. So they probably had forward that what was going to be written there. And they copied from Genesis, in my opinion, without a doubt. They copied from Genesis and twisted it in their own way and put it in the Sumerian text. Now,
yes, really quick, I would agree with that, because I get into that argument a lot with people. Well, the Egyptians have a similar story, and then this one has a similar story of the virgin birth. Well, I try to tell people, these people believe in, UFOs are coming from, galaxy Zeta Reticuli, whatever you want to call it. To me, that sounds absolutely insane to me to believe that. But you know what? I respect everyone's belief. Okay, cool. Maybe there's a chance there's giant galaxies far away with aliens living there. I wouldn't put my money on it, but my point is that they will believe that. But when I tell them that Satan, the fallen angels, Lucifer, and all his little friends, they were there before the earth was made. They have the ultimate knowledge that we don't even have come close to. They with their own eyes, they saw God form earth, and who knows what else that God made that we don't even know what's going on in another realm or something. So yes, it is not ridiculous to think that they can simply make up a lie and use stories similar to the Bible to throw us off. You got to think about it. They're not playing. They're not trying to get us today. They've been telling this story for thousands of years for it to come together now. Like they're thinking way ahead, right? They're playing chess, not checkers. Just want to let you guys know that. Think about that for a second. They were there when God made the earth. Just think about they're just beyond another level of intelligence. And that's why you can't beat a demon on your own. That's why you need Jesus. Specifically, he says, call on me, because you can't beat them on your own. They're too intelligent. They're too strong. Anyways.
Yep. So true. So just remember, people out there, that those of you who are delving into the Anunnaki and the Sumerian text and Thoth and that anti-Bible, anti-God, anti-Christ Billy Carson, don't listen to that guy, man. Don't listen to that guy. The Anunnaki ain't going to save anyone from the burning pit of hell.
He is the Anunnaki. Look at his face.
Yeah. Yeah. That guy, man, he's said a lot of things against the Bible and Christ, really bad things. And I only listen to him to see what the enemy's doing. And that's where I'll stand on that. So back to Sumer. Supposedly it's a site of the earliest known civilization. I have to disagree with that, because the Aboriginal people in Australia have a rock art or cave drawings that date back 50,000 years ago. I digress. So this is located in the southernmost part of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, in the area that later became Babylonia. It is now southern Iraq, around Baghdad to the Persian Gulf. Sorry, folks, I have a cough, so I'm sucking on a cough drop. By the 3rd millennium BC, Sumer was the site of at least 12 separate cities, including Kish, Erech, Separ, Akshak, Larak, Nippur, Adab, Umma, Lagish, and Bad Tibria, and Larsha. Each of these states comprised, now they had walled cities, and this was surrounding their villages and land. Each state Each city-state, they worshiped their own deity, whose temple was the central structure of the city. So this was a time of the worshiping of the different dark angels. So the political power originally belonged to the citizens, but as the rivalry between the various city-states increased, each adopted the institution of kingship. Now back to the Sumerian kings list, it records that the 8 kings, once again, reigned before a great flood. 7 sages plus Satan. Afterwards, the list claims that the various city-states and these dynasties of kings, they temporarily gained power over the others. There's a power struggle. So the Sumerian kings list begins with the very origin of kingship, which is seen as a divine institution. Once again, the kingship had descended from heaven. The rulers in the earliest dynasties are represented, reigning fantastically long periods. Altogether, it was it says Alulim became the king. This one ruled for 28,800 years, and Adajar ruled for 36,000 years. So just these 2 kings ruled for 64,800 years. And likely, they probably did. Some other rulers mentioned in the early list, such as Etana and Lugal Banda and Gilgamesh, are mythical or legendary figures who the heroic feats are subject to a series of Sumerian and Babylonian narratives, compositions, etc. The early list of the names of the 8 kings, with a total of 241,200 years from the time when the kingship descended from heaven to the time when the flood swept over the land. And once more, the kingship was lowered from heaven after the flood. So these dark angels didn't give up, right? And God had allowed them to do this. Because if it wasn't for that, we would have destroyed them right there and then. So this amazingly, it's amazingly long tenure of the early kings has provoked many attempts at interpretation throughout history. At one extreme is the complete dismissal of the astronomically large figures as completely artificial. How can they live this long, right? And, the view is unworthy of serious consideration. At the other is the belief that the numbers have a basis in reality, that the early kings were indeed gods who were capable of living much longer than humans. In between these two extremes is a hypothesis that the figures represent relative power, triumph or importance. For example, in ancient Egypt, the phrase "he died at 110" generally referred to someone who lived life to the full and who offered an important contribution to society. In the same way, these extremely long reigns of the early kings may represent how incredibly important they were perceived as being in the eyes of the people. But this doesn't explain, however, why the periods of tenure later switched to realistic time periods. Well, this is like, for example, the early people in the Bible who lived, they lived, hundreds of years, almost 1,000 years. And things changed. God changed things. That no man would live to 120 years, and that immortal spirit of these entities was going to be removed. So this, to me, explains why they went from living long periods of time to just a normal, realistic, timeline. And those of you can go back and you can read the Old Testament, and it'll tell you about that. But related to the to this perspective I'm talking about is the belief that although the early kings are historically unattested, this does not preclude their possible correspondence with historical rulers who later mythicized this whole thing. Some scholars have even sought to explain these figures through mathematical investigation and interpretation. They always try to explain this stuff with mathematics and all this other science stuff. It's just, I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it's worthless. But continuing with there's another scholar. His name is Bryant G. Wood. 2003, he wrote that he had drawn attention to the fact that there are remarkable similarities between the Sumerian Kings list and the accounts in Genesis. Right? I covered that a little bit. But for example, Genesis tells the story of the Great Flood and Noah's effort to save all species of animals on the earth from destruction. Likewise, in the Sumerian King list, there is discussion of a great deluge, where the text states that the flood swept over the earth. The Sumerian Kings list provides a list of, once again, the 8 kings. Some versions have 10. I think that's incorrect. I think, in my opinion, after reading all these other books and scholars, it's 8, period. So they reigned for a long period of time before the flood, ranging from 18,600 to 43,200 years ago. Now, it's noteworthy to note that this is similar to Genesis 5, where the generations from creation to the flood are recorded. Interestingly, between Adam and Noah, there are 8 generations, just as there are 8 kings from the beginning when the kingship and the flood and the Sumerian Kings list. So you see what the accuser did. He gave these Sumerians the knowledge what to write down in early history when they weren't even around, these Sumerians. And it's what the Holy Spirit gave Noah to write down. These dark angels have, once again, Lionel saying, they have knowledge of what happened in the past. They saw what happened. They're very ancient. They've been around since the beginning of time. God created these entities before they became dark. So continuing, after the flood, the King's list records the kings ruled for much shorter periods of time. Thus, the Sumerian King's list not only documents a great early flood in man's history, but also reflects some pattern of decreasing longevity as found in the Bible. Men had extremely long lifespans before the flood and much shorter lifespans following the flood. And those who study the Bible, you know that. The Sumerian Kings list, it is a perplexing mystery, but why would the Sumerians combine mythical rulers with actual historical rulers in one document? Why are there so many similarities with Genesis? Pretty much covered that. Here's some questions that people will ask. Why were the ancient kings described as ruling for thousands of years? Because they were demigods. Some of them were just plain gods. They were the lower G gods. Just like mentioned in the Bible, that God sits in the council of the gods and he brings judgment upon them. These are just some of the questions that many people want to know. And I don't blame them. So many ancient legends tell us of bygone ages, a group of 7 sages of extraordinary wisdom and untold powers visit the earth from the stars. They traveled around the world and passed on the knowledge of all the sciences and the arts of the people. They advised the kings and their royal duties, instituted the proper codes of living, and established the correct modes of ritual in order to sustain the cosmic harmony. And they ensure the happiness and prosperity of the people. It was said to be the time when on our planet was closely integrated with our larger cosmic family. A very different era compared to the profane world we live in today. Now they came and established these rules and these sciences and civilization. This is similar to the Book of Enoch, when it talks about the angels coming in and teaching early humanity the sciences, the mathematics of the stars, and forbidden knowledge. So the most extensive accounts of the 7 sages have been preserved in Mesopotamia and the Indian traditions, although they found traces of similar information almost everywhere. Let us begin exploring the Mesopotamia account of the 7 sages. Who were they collectively known as the Apkalu? In the Mesopotamian religion, the Apkalu were the 7 sages of extraordinary wisdom who came as teachers of humanity in the antediluvian times. The term Apkalu, Akkadian, or Abgal, Sumerian, means sage or wise. Now these Apkalu, they're depicted as fish gods, half man, half fish, or they're cloaked in fish skin. Now, each of the Apkalu served as a counselor of one of the 7 antediluvian kings that came from the waters of the Apsu, and which was the sea of fresh water under the earth. In Mesopotamia, Apsu was a term used for fresh water for underground aquifers. Lakes, rivers, springs, wells were thought to draw the water from the Apsu. The Apkalu were sent by the god Enki. Enki, also known as Satan, the king of the Apsu, the protector of mankind. Enki was a god of wisdom, civilization, water, fertility, crafts, and magic. In the city of Eridu, Enki's temple was called Iapsu, house of the deep waters, and was located at the edge of the swamp on Apsu. In many texts, the Apkalu were described as Puradu fishes. For instance, the late Babylonian epic of Ira has the following lines about the Apkalu. We are the 7 Apkalu of Apsu, the pure Puradu fishes, who are perfect and lofty wisdom like Enki, their lord, who can make my body holy. The poem of Iri, tablet 2, line 162. The description of the Apkalu as Puradu fishes have been an enduring mystery to many. Many of the Assyrian relief carvings of the Apkalu show them as a man wearing a fish skin cloak. The first of the 7 sages had appeared in Babylon. In the antediluvian times was called Uana. That's Akkadian, or Oannes in Greek. And he had the title of Adapa, meaning wise. The Chaldean astrologer Berosus, the Babylonica 300 BC. The Berosus lived a long time ago. So Berosus said that in ancient times there was a great crowd of men at Babylon, and they lived without laws. In the first year of this reign of Alorus, the first antediluvian king of the Sumerian king's list, quote, there made its appearance from a part of the Itharian Sea, which bordered upon Babylonia, an animal endowed with reason, who was called Oannes. The whole body of the animal was like that of a fish, and under a fish's head another head, and also feet below, similar to those of man. Sustained to the fish's tail, his voice too and language was articulate and human, and a representation of him is preserved even to this day. This being in the daytime used to converse with men, but took no food at that season. And he gave them an insight into letters and science and every kind of art. He taught them how to construct houses, to found temples, to compile laws, and explained to them the principles of geometrical knowledge. He made them distinguish the seeds of the earth and showed them how to collect fruits. In short, he instructed them in everything which could tend to soften manners and humanize mankind. From that time, so universal were his instructions, noting the material had been added by way of improvement. When the sun set, it was the custom of his being to plunge again into the sea and abide all night in the deep. For he was amphibious. After this, there appeared other animals like oannes, of which Berosus promises to give an account when it comes to the history of the kings. Accounts such as really makes one wonder how much we really know about our planet or our past. Even the Bible says, ask your fathers about the ancient world, about the past, and we know nothing. They know nothing. Not only was his oannes possessed of unearthly wisdom, he imparted to the Babylonians in the antediluvian times before Noah's flood. But he dressed as a fishman and dived under the sea at night. Did he and the other Apkalu truly come from the subterranean world, located in the midst of the underground aquifers, the Apsu, which could perhaps be accessed by passages under the sea? Now, it's funny when you think about Revelation. When there's a new world, the seas will be gone, right? So we have to wonder what really lurks in the oceans. We haven't even we don't today with our modern technology. Suppose we don't even know what's in the depths of the sea right now.
I don't think we don't even go to space. I think all that footage you're seeing is them trolling us, and that's the stuff they use to explore the ocean. I think they're exploring the ocean. They're not exploring, what do you call it? We're not going to be surfing on the rings of Saturn anytime soon, and we're not going to have Elon Musk says we're going to have people living on Mars, like, what do you say, next year or something like that. Anyways, there's something in the Bible. Doesn't it say that? I believe the Bible says he's going to judge this, the people on earth, and he specifically says he's going to judge the ones in the sea, the dead in the sea. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, because I have all these. I have a book that talks about a true story. Long story short, there's like these spiritual underwater kingdoms that I theorize, and many other people agree, who are all into this subject, that there is an underwater kingdom, a spiritual one, and plus, not to mention, all the massive cities that are under the water right now because of the flood. So there's a lot going on down there, and most of UFO sightings are next to the ocean. Just want to say that.
Yep. These craft that people see flying around, they're not coming from space. You may see them in the atmosphere, but they're coming from this Earth, in my opinion. They're not living on Mars or Zeta Reticuli or Antares or whatever. Anyways, continuing. There are many, there's so many legends from around the world which speak of a subterranean land peopled by the spirits of the supernatural beings. Now, here in America, a number of Native American tribes, such as like the Hopi, the Navajo, the Iroquois, the Mandan Sioux, they believe their ancestors emerged from a subterranean land through caverns and tunnels. Every time the Hopi Supreme Creator, Soktiknang, destroyed the world, Some of the righteous Hopi, they say, were taken to safe locations in the subterranean world. Now, going to the Irish legends, the underworld Anwen was populated with these fairies and demons, the spirits, deities, and they could only be reached through portals hidden in the mounds of tumuli. Now, the Greek built sanctuaries and caves, for they believed also that there were certain caves and had passages that led to the underworld. And regarding the Mayans, they also regarded caves and cenotes as openings to watery underworld of 9 subterranean legends. In the there's a lot of history on this. In the Indian legends, there are 7 subterranean regions which are collectively called Patala or Nagaloka. There are these are the realms of the divine serpent beings called the Nagas. These are serpent entities. These are probably what the people will claim to see these days, the reptilians. And there are other spirits called Danavas and Yakshas and some other things, all of whom are progeny of the 7 sages of Vedic tradition. See, now we're going from the Apkalu, now we're going to the Vedic traditions. These Nagas, these serpent beings, they're usually depicted as part human, part serpent, from sometimes with a 7-hooded serpent canopy over their head. And they guard the entrances of the Hindu temples. They are believed to be powerful and act as guardians of treasures and sacred teachings. Interestingly, the Nagas are still worshipped in villages across India on a specific day of the year for fertility.
Really quick, does that have any relation to them with the little flute and making the snakes dance?
I think it does.
Yeah, maybe.
It does. A lot of serpent worship over there. And these subterranean regions where the Nagas dwell are said to be delightful. I don't know about that, but they're filled with resplendent palaces, ornamented with precious gems, groves, lakes, and the rivers. And the sun and moon cannot be seen from there, obviously. But the jewels decorating the hoods of the Nagas emit an engulfance that illuminates the region. Now we go to Southeast Asia. The indigenous people there also believe that the Nagas are the benefactors and protectors of humanity. They are capable of changing their forms. Now, if I don't recommend anyone reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but it says in there that when these serpents, when their glamour was lifted from the sight of humanity, they were serpent. They posed as humans, but when the glamour was lifted, the veil, people can see what they really were. They were serpents. So yes, they do have changelings, factors in them. How they do it, I have no idea, but they can change form. And the Naga princesses are said to have married human kings in the past. They assisted people in establishing cities, digging irrigation channels and protecting dams. But if the kings or the subjects become wicked, the Nagas punish people by releasing excess water, which causes disastrous floods that will wipe out any village. As per the Thai and Lothian beliefs, the serpent beings in their subterranean watery kingdom are called I have this written down here in my notes, Muang Badan, which is the endless water source. Then comes from the Mekong River, and it basically it keeps from all the world rivers drying out. So these Nagas, man, really wicked. It also may be very well known that during the Roman times, Osiris, who the Romans called Serapis, was the lord of the underworld in ancient Egypt. And his consort, Isis, were depicted by the Greco-Roman sculptors as part or full serpent, resembling the Naga serpents of Asia. And that's really strange, right? So you have to ask yourself, why did the Romans adopt this artistic type of convention? They were the same entities around the world, man. They were just making their world tour.
Well, isn't Medusa one of those? Pretty much what it would look like, right?
I think Medusa was.
That's like with the little Indian statue, or the ones in India, the little statues of the Naga. They look like that, like little Medusas.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think she was a Naga.
For sure. Well, with the little, is the snakes on the head just extra stuff, or is there any description of that too? Well, I mean, they shapeshift. I guess they can do whatever they want, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I guess. Anyways, go ahead.
So, it is generally believed that the Serapis was a syncretic deity, and it was probably derived from the worship of Osiris and his sacred bull Apis. So the temple of Serapis was existed in Babylon, and the deity of this temple was consulted when Alexander was on his deathbed. So that's interesting. On his deathbed. And in the Babylonian context, it was the god Enki, who was called Sar-Aspa, meaning king of the Apsu. So, it's possible that the Romans took the term Serapis from Sar-Apsa, the title Enki, who ruled in the Apsu and sent the Apkalu to Babylon in the antediluvian times. So the question is, did Enki have any serpentine attributes? Well, although the cylinder seal's representations of Enki does not reveal any snake-like features, one of the Sumerian epithets of Enki was Usamgal, which means the great serpent. Now, this opens up the possibility of a serpent aspect in Enki, although the term great serpent could also be a metaphor for a man of great wisdom. For Enki was the wisest of the Mesopotamian gods. Of course he was, because he was Satan. Things become more interesting, though, when we consider the Nergal, the god of war, destruction, and pestilence, who was the lord of the Apsu, or the underworld in Akkadian times. This is 2000 BC. The Nergal were depicted with serpent heads spouting from his shoulders. The waistband had a battle axe. Feet, which were clearly established, is serpent nature. One of his titles was Tamer of Serpents, which became interpreted as the Lord of Serpents. Nergal had a son. He also had serpent heads emerging from his shoulders. Sometimes he was represented with a human head, and the symbol of a pair of serpents coiled around his staff. This is the same symbol, of course, of the Greeks called Caduceus, which was carried by the Greeks called him Hermes, but there's also Thoth, Mercury, Odin. This Thoth thing is just nothing but a dark angel. Hermes is depicted as a man, the Greek. Mercury as a man, also with the other culture, and a bird head with the Egyptians. And this was a shape-shifting dark angel demonic entity, period. So people out there, stop with this Thoth thing.
Is Thoth older than the Sumerian tablets? The emerald what are those tablets that guy always talks about, Billy Carson? He always brings up the tablets. They're ancient, they're old, and there's like a flood story in it too, or something like that.
Thoth supposedly came from Atlantis.
No, but how old are those tablets? Are they older than the Sumerian?
I think it's around the same time.
Yeah, and then the story's similar, like we were saying. So there's a flood story. I mean, it could be talking about another flood,
Could be, yeah.
or it's just another, counterfeit of what Satan wants. Because Satan wants to be God. There's the pyramids on earth. There's pyramids in heaven, but just better ones.
Yep. So, you can find this symbol carved in stone scattered all across India, and those places where the Nagas are still worshipped. So maybe someday we'll do a show on Hermes and Thoth, but not today.
Yeah, I should do one on Thoth. As I say it, Thoth. Yeah,
Thoth, Thoth.
It's just
different.
I always get that. That always comes up with the New Agers or whatever you want to call them. They believe in the alien. I would just call it the alien theory. They always bring up that bird god Thoth.
Yeah,
all these tablets are older, bro. They're old, man. I'm like, dude, but there's no. And I'll give them like some evidence that the Bible has predicted many prophecies have come true, and just other archaeological evidence. And they just ignorant. Nah, bro, the tablets are older, man. That's all it is. That's always the same argument that it's older.
That's how much people are brainwashed out there. They don't grasp the concept that what I said earlier. Just because it's written doesn't make it older. It's just it's that easy.
Yeah, it's not hard to wrap your mind around that. Of course, Moses wasn't there when the earth was created, but he's telling a story. Anyways, go ahead.
So we have a whole family of Mesopotamian deities of the underworld. Sometimes they're collectively referred to as the Anunnaki. So we covered the Apkalu, the Nagas, now the Anunnaki, who have very obvious serpent associations. They connect them to the Nagas of Asia, who are said to have ruled, in the subterranean water realms. And we can't dismiss the body of legends and symbols. Just, put them off as fantasies, right? We can scrutinize all these stories. But when you look at the Bible and the serpent and all this stuff, there's something to this. Under our feet, there are vast reservoirs of fresh water, which can extend to 30,000 feet below the surface. So we know there's a water world underneath us, and these subterranean aquifers have many vertical levels separated by layers of porous rock, similar to the multiple levels of the underworld that ancients spoke about. So that's very interesting when you look into the geology and geography of the earth. If not possible that, in the midst of these aquifers, there are islands of green where unknown life form thrives. There's cracks and caverns on the surface of the earth that could act as conduits for air and refracted sunlight into these dark regions. They can create a perpetual pleasant environment from extreme temperatures. This subterranean realm, it can be accessible through tunnels and vents located under mountains and the lakes and seas. If you value your life, you wouldn't do that, but it's possible. These are camouflaged or guarded by unwanted intruders. As per the Sumerian legends, the underworld has 7 gates, which are guarded by a gatekeeper called Niti. Now, perhaps the denizens of the otherworldly realm, maybe they're bioluminescent, maybe they glow, right? There's sea life out there that glows at night. They're bioluminescent. Like deep water fishes and organisms like jellyfish, algae, and like bacteria. They glow. So a possibility these entities glow. So it's it's not possible that an advanced race of beings have made these subterranean aquifers into their habitat, and they choose to reveal themselves only in certain epochs. when the consciousness of humanity is excuse me, is elevated through this whole new age wisdom stuff. I think people they're calling these things, man. That's why it says that men's hearts are fed for what's coming upon the earth in the Bible. And the subterranean geography of our planet now includes there's many rivers that flow underground. Like we're in the desert, and there's underground aquifers. That's where we get our water from, drinking water. And there's sinkholes appearing everywhere. These underground rivers, they form lakes and valleys, and caves and gorges and canyons and all this stuff. So the story from the Mahabharata, once the prince Bhima was poisoned by an envious half-brother who tied him and threw him into the river Ganges. The water current swept him along a mythical path to the realm of the divine Naga serpents. There, Bhima was recognized by the Naga king Vasuki, who revived him, I guess, it says, and then offered him a celestial ambrosia to drink, which would confer on Bhima's enormous strength. Having consumed this elixir, this divine elixir, and feeling rested and rejuvenated, Bhima took a bath in the sacred waters of a subterranean river and purified himself. Now, subsequently, the Nagas led him from a subterranean region to the river Ganges, and he emerged at the very place where he was had been pushed in. Now, considering that we know practically nothing about the ecosystem and the aquifers that extend 30,000 feet below their surface, or the subterranean geography of our planet, it's probably premature for us to dismiss stories such as these as more than fairy tales. Things have not been the same way on our planet all the time. It's always changing. And so the past has been radically different from the present, as all ancient accounts tell us. So keep it up in mind when you listen about the ancients. And this gives you knowledge on what's being put out there, and it helps you make sense and not get confused with Anunnaki, Apkalu, Nagas, so you know what they are. Now, we come back to the topic of the Apkalu. Specific information about these names of Apkalu and their attributes were discovered in a ritual incantation of the Bit Misira tablet series. These incantations were used during the performance of Apotropaic rituals to counter evil portents. For the rituals, the Sumerians used to make 7 clay figurines of the Apkalu. And after they completed the ritual, the figurines were buried under the floor to avert evil from the buildings and sickness from the inhabitants. In one of the Bit Misira incantations, the Apkalu are referred to as pure Pardu fishes who originate in the river, and they are collectively extolled for their ability to control the plans of heaven and earth. Now, I'll quote something from that series. Uana, who accomplishes the plans of heaven and earth, and Uani Duga, who is endowed with comprehensive understanding, and Imiduduga, from whom a good destiny has been decreed. Imigalaama, who was born in a house, and Imibuluga, who grew up in the pasture land, and An Inhelida, the conjurer of the Eridu, who ascended to heaven, the pure Paradu fishes, the Paradu fishes of the sea, the 7 of them, the 7 sages, who have originated in the river, who control the plans of heaven and earth. The Apkalu are said to be the great builders, as is evident in the epithet of An-Elida, the conjurer of the city Eridu. The 7 sages were associated with the 7 ancient cities of Sumer. And it's Eridu, Ur, Nippur, Kulab, Kish, Lagash, and Shuropak. As per the epic of Gilgamesh, the 7 sages had laid out the plan of Uruk. Now, after the deluge, however, moral men of learning took over the duties of the Apkalu. In some of these texts, the post-flood sages are referred as Unamu, meaning craftsmen, in order to distinguish them from the Apkalu. In the epic of Ida, it tells us that after this flood, the storm god Marduk had banished the Apkalu to the Apsu. Now, the Apsu, it's an underwater world. You know what it is? It's hell, man. So, subsequently, the earthly Unamis were given the task of cleansing Marduk's shrine. So, the iconography of the Apkalu, the most striking aspect of them is the manner in which they were depicted on the Sumerian seals and then the walls of a palace of King Ashurmarspirpal II, an Assyrian capital of Nimrud. Some of them look like a man dressed, in a fish cloak, like I mentioned earlier, which is how the first Apkalu Oannes was described by Berosus. Some are human-looking. They are probably the earthly Unamas of the post-flood world. A few quite mysteriously are depicted as birdmen, like Toth, having the face of an eagle but a body of a human. Perhaps the bird-headed Apkalu were capable of flight, right? Maybe. So the Apkalu supposedly ascended to heaven and could have been one of them. We don't know. We can conjecture. But generally, the Apkalu are crowned with the horned helmet, which was a symbol of divinity in ancient Mesopotamia. In most cases, they have four wings. And some of the angels in the Bible have multiple wings. They wore rosette bracelets or like prayer beads on their wrist.
Yeah, I'm just like different angels have different amount of wings. I believe some have 6. I think it's the seraphim or the cherub. And then those beads, they have like the beads and stuff, the jewelry. I kind of want to say that's like some kind of ancient worship they do in the Catholic Church with the whole rosary thing, the beads and all that stuff. It's kind of like monks and stuff. Have you ever thought about that? I have a lot of similarities. Like Catholic, their rituals have a lot of similarities with other pagan. It's pretty much like all the multiple religions all in one, the Catholic Church with the things that they do. But anyways, yeah, it's just interesting. I'm Googling up and some angels have 6 wings.
There's an interesting article in Ancient History Encyclopedia which explored in detail what the Apkalu hold in their hands. When you look at this helps us understand the ritual significance of these objects and to find their connections with similar artifacts in other cultures. Many of the Apkalu figures carry an object in their left hand that has been properly described as a handbag, but is actually, they conjecture, a ritual bucket containing sacred water called the Banadu in Akkadian. The Apkalu sprinkle the holy water using a pine cone called the Muleu in Akkadian. So they hold this in their right hand. This is an act of ritual purification that still persists in many regions today. So that might have been the whole mystery of the handbag. That's a good theory, but unless we were there, we don't know for sure. But it makes some sense. So apart from the ritual bucket, the Apkalu may hold in their left hand a prayer bead, a rosary. a flowering bunch or a flowering bunch or a scepter. In all such cases, the right hand is empty and it's always raised, such that the palm faces the viewer. In the Indian art, this hand position is called the Abhava Mudra, the fear-dispelling hand gesture. Posture, I'm sorry. The objects that are held by the Apkalu reveal their many functions as sages and royal priests of the kings. Not only were they teachers of mankind, but they also performed many ritual functions and were looked upon as figures of authority who afforded protection to the people. It's interesting to how the objects associated with the Apkalu can be seen in widely dispersed cultures, and it has already been noted by many researchers. This ritual bucket containing the sacred water can be seen in an Olmec carving, 900 BC. This is Central America now. It's depicted in Stela 19 at La Venta.
Wait, what did you say they have? What exactly? The Olmec, what did they find?
The same thing, the ritual bucket.
Oh, and they found it next to the statue, or where did they find the bucket?
It's a stela. It's like a carving.
Oh, okay. So it's okay.
It says that it depicts a god or priest seated in the coils of a serpent, possibly the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, holding a bucket in one hand, which looks extremely like the Banadudu. And
what's that?
It's goes back to what I was talking about the Apsu and the bucket containing water. That's what it's called that, but we'll say bucket containing water.
I googled just the fear dispelling hand gesture, and you just get a plethora of Eastern religion, like Buddha, Shiva, with that hand gesture, and all these different. There's so many different ones. Chinese, all with the same hand gesture. It just tells you that these sages or whatever, we're all teaching the same thing to everybody. They're all doing it in a different way and just slightly pictured different based on culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah. These sages visited everywhere around the world. So
yeah, clearly all these statues look the same, just from all different Eastern countries.
So this researcher, Joseph Campbell, he noted that the left hand of this seated figure is held somewhat awkwardly, turned at the wrist with the palm out, in a gesture that in the Orient would be everywhere interpreted as the boon bestowing hand gesture, or the Varada mudra of divinity. That's some kind of Hindu thing there. So the Apkalu performing the Abhaya mudra means fear dispelling hand gesture with the right hand, while the Olmec deity or priest performing the Varada mudra, boon bestowing hand posture, with the left hand. So incidentally, these two mudras are often performed together. Many of the depictions of the Buddha show him performing the Abhaya mudra with the right hand and the Yaharada mudra with the left hand. So it is if there was some kind of unwritten rule specifying which hand should be used to performing which mudra in cultures around the world, that stuck to these conventions. So continuing, it's been noted by the researchers that the ritual bucket motif appears on a monolithic T-shaped pillar at the archaeology site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, where the oldest layer of the site has been dated back to 9,000 BC, a few centuries after the end of the last ice age. In these excavation pits on top of a hill, the archaeologists found many T-shaped pillars arranged in circles. The tallest pillars tower 16 feet and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some of these now are blank, while others are carved with animal motifs: foxes, lions, boars, scorpions, and vultures. Now this archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who excavated the site, described these circular stones as a first human-built holy place and humanity's first cathedral on a hill. So we had a guest on, Aaron Judkins. He's an archaeologist, and we discussed this. And these people were probably the Day 6 people before Adam and Eve, and they were worshiping the star people, the Anunnaki, Apkalu, Naga. They're known by so many names. So, and on these pillars, there's a row of buckets. These buckets that we're talking about, the ritual bucket held by the Apkalu. Just below this is a carving of a vulture. There's a vulture holding a circular object, and there's an eagle-headed Apkalu sprinkling sacred water using a pine cone. In order to make these, it was like purific. It was like it was a ritual to make the lands pure and fertile. So the implication of this tantalizing era of 9,000 BC, it was said that the people who built Göbekli Tepe knew about the 7 sages and probably saw them. So they were performing these purification rituals for the fertility of the land. So since Göbekli Tepe was built a few centuries after the end of the Ice Age, when the melting ice, went away after the global flood, which is recounted in the flood legends of many cultures, this is, it's quite possible that the knowledge of the Apkalu extended into the antediluvian times, which is exactly what the Sumerian legends tell us. So these 7 sages have been around for a long time. These are the 7 dark angels plus Satan, like I noted earlier. Now, not only in these regions, but let's go to Africa. The Dogon tribe of Mali in West Africa also appear to have retained the memories of their interactions with the Apkalu. As per their beliefs, thousands of years ago, they were visited by amphibious fishmen called Nomu, who supposedly came from the Sirius star system and taught the Dogon many skills, just like the Sumerian Apkalu. The Nomu are depicted with a human upper torso and a fish-like lower body. They descended from the sky in a vessel accompanied by fire and thunder. So after arriving to Earth, the Nomu dug a reservoir of water and divided into it. Since they needed a water environment to live in, they were referred to by the Dogons as the teachers and the masters of water. So once again, we have teachers. They're all teachers. Since you go back to Enoch, they're all teachers. They're all these, whatever. So the Dogon legends relate that the sky god Amma had created 4 pairs of Nomu, twins, at the very beginning of creation. One of them they rebelled against the universal order of Amma, because which one of the Nomu progenies were sacrificed by Amma, leaving 7 of them. And in this one book, the Sirius Mystery, Sirius Star System, this was 1976. Robert Temple, he wrote that the Dogons knew that the Sirius was a binary star consisting of the bright star that we see called Sirius A, or the dog star, and a white dwarf star called Sirius B, which is invisible to the naked eye. So Dogons also knew about Sirius B around Sirius A in an elliptical orbit once in 50 years. The anomalous knowledge of the Dogons has been a source of great mystery. How did they know this? How did they know there was a invisible binary star? This came from the Apkalu, because once again, they're very ancient and they have knowledge of the heavens. What's in the second heaven. So it appears that the Apkalu also had visited the Aboriginal Australians as well, and their global mission of propagating the laws of civilization. The inhabitants of Kimberley region of Northwest Australia speak of a powerful spirit beings called the Wanjinas, who came down from the Milky Way and brought once again the law, culture, language to the people, just like the Sumerians. The Wanjina images have been seen painted on rock galleries throughout the region, marked in red and white ochre. These paintings are, they're traditionally repainted each decade to ensure the image was kept fresh and lively. It is estimated that the earliest layers of paintings may date back nearly 4,000 years ago. The Wanjinas are typically depicted as a large white face, round black eyes, a nose, but without any mouth. And they have a red halo around their head, with rays of light radiating outwards. And you can look those up if you look up the word Wanjina. So, there's a thing called in these stories of the Aboriginals of Australia. It's called the Dreamtime stories, and the first Wanjina were called the Ididar. It means he lives in the Milky Way and is the father of all Wanjinas.
Oh, it looks scary. I'm looking at the cave painting. It looks like a gray alien with, like, I don't know if it's a halo or has a glow behind its head. It has massive eyes, and that's just one. There's another one where same thing. It looks like see this Wanjina. It's a different one, similar, but this one it's showing whoever did these cave paintings. They're really trying to emphasize that there's a glow coming from it, because the first one I see has like this sun behind it type of thing, and this other one has that sun behind it, and then they put lines around the eyes as if the eyes are completely glowing. Very interesting to look at.
Absolutely, man. There's a lot of history out in the world, and these Wanjinas taught the Aboriginals everything they needed to know. Similar story, and their work was done. And they painted their images on cave walls and entered into a nearby water hole. Since then, they have lived at the bottom of the water source associated with the rock paintings. They are regarded as the powerful rainmaker spirits who control the clouds and rainfall and punish those who break the laws with floods, lightning, and cyclones. Now, there are some obvious connections between the Apkalu and the Wanjinas, which suggests that they are one and the same. Like the Apkalu, the Wanjinas gave the Aboriginal their laws, culture, language, just as the Apkalu came from the freshwater aquifers of the earth. The Wanjina Wanjina entered the watering holes and returned to the bottom of the water source associated with the cave painting sites. So in some respects, however, the powers of the Apkalu seem to exceed that. They are said to have that come from the stars or the Milky Way, the Wanjina. I'm sorry, and they created the earth and all living things. So the 7 sages of the Vedic Indian were believed to be, I guess, for lack of a better word right now, extraterrestrial origin. They were luminous beings of light, which would explain the rays of light coming out of the halo around the Wanjina's head, which are ascribed with similar extraordinary powers, but these are angelic beings, so they would give off a glow.
This is really interesting. I'm like hooked on this Wanjina thing. I mean, these paintings they're 4,000 years old, they're saying, these paintings, and it looks exactly like a gray alien, but glowing. It is insane how accurate this painting is of what we're looking at today.
Yeah, they have changing capabilities, man. They can look like a bird head, a man, a bull, a gray. These things are just all they're angelic. They're ancient. They know how to do things that we don't understand. That's including changing their appearance. So if we go to Greece now, even though the seven sages are not mentioned in the ancient legends of Greece, around the 6th to 7th century BC, seven of the wisest philosophers, statesmen, and lawgivers of Greece were designated as the seven sages. So they talk about seven sages in Greece, but these seven sages were men. They were known for the wisdom in all areas of knowledge and poetry and politics and all this stuff, and predicting eclipses and many of them maxims that appear at Delphi and attributed to the seven sages, such as Meden Agan. So they had knowledge of the seven sages, but they were just copying that by being seven sages, they were human form. And the Sabbath of ancient India, outside of Mesopotamia, the most extensive mention of the seven sages are found in India. The Vedic traditions, they talk of the seven sages of divine origins, luminous beings of light who were mind-born sons of Brahma. These seven Rishi were collectively known as the Sepataris, or Sapa 7, or Rishi equals sages. In the epics of the Puranas, they are generally enumerated as Maharishi, Atri, Angiris. I can't really pronounce their language too well, but I'm trying here. Pulasi, Pulaha, Kratu, and Vashishta. The divine sages of India took human wives and established Rishi lineages. Some of their descendants became illumined sages who attained heaven through the performances of sacrifice and took over the mantle of the original seven sages from their predecessors. This led to the formation of a new list of seven sages, and with Agastya was added as the eighth sage in some of the contexts. The Vedic convention thus mirrors that of the Mesopotamian, where the seven antediluvian Apkalus of divine origin were followed by Unamas in the post-flood period. This is after the flood. So although the second list of these seven stages, starting with Vishwamitra, were of earthly origin, they became most famous from their divine ancestors. Now, this is because they came to be regarded as founders of the seven main Gotras, which means clans or ancestral lineages of the Hindu. So originally, the only people of the priestly or Brahmin class traced their ancestry to one of the seven Rishi. Later classes were included in the Sutra text. It is laid down that Kshtriya warrior class, which that means, and the Vaishya, which means business class, should take the Gotra of the Purohiya, which means family priest. So today, it says it mentions I'm getting notes here that every Hindu has a Gotra, by which they claim to be a descent of the seven sages. So one cannot marry someone from the same Gotra. Thus, the Gotra organization ensures a form of clan exogamy, which was prevalent in ancient societies. So these ancients knew very well that this outbreeding reduces the risk of children having genetic defects that scientists have discovered in recent times. As early as the Rigveda, the hymns were sung in adoration of the seven sages. They who were versed in the ritual and mitra in hymns and rules were the 7 godlike Rishi. They were the 7 holy singers, the gods of old and as our fathers, and who first performed the sacrificial worship. The Rigaveda hymn of Vashistha is called the knower of both earth and heaven, an epithet also used for the Sumerian Apkalu. In the book, The Traditions of the 7 Rishi by Dr. John Michener, he explores in detail what the ancient Sanskrit tells us about these 7 sages of India. In nearly all contexts, they are described as mind-born sons of Brahma, where Brahma is the universal soul who pervades all of creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna reveals his universal form of Arjuna, he says, "The 7 great sages of the 4 ancient ancestors were born from mind and received my power. From them came all creatures of this world." So it goes on to say that, these are the lords of creation and the sages who acquired higher spiritual knowledge, or it's known as the Brahmajana, and thereby attained moksha. So the 7 rishis are luminous light beings, so they glow. The 7 bright crescent ones, they're known by. They were a unanimous opinion that they came into being was called the Sastra, from which the dharma of the entire working of the world springs forth. They were the foremost knowers of the Veda, who were created as teachers of the Veda, and they spontaneously attaining wisdom. They are establishing the Dharma. They are knowers of yoga and teachers of science of moksha, which means liberation. The Sanat Kumara described them as the 7 unassailable brothers whose yamsas, lines of descendants it means, are celebrated. They are they sustain these 3 words and are honored by gods and demons. Now, the Vadaragarga said that the 7 rishi are devoted to Dharma and intent upon the protection of living beings. So they're described as the teachers and the first king of the solar dynasty and contemporaries and successors. So I think for now we're going to stop here with part 1 of the 7 sages plus Satan, and we'll have part 2 coming up. And there's a lot more. We're going to get deeper into this, and it's going to get really more. You think this is interesting? There's going to be a lot more coming up in part 2.